Inside New Orleans Sports with Eric Asher is underwritten by...
At Villere's Florist, we deliver the magic of flowers 7 days a week to the North Shore and South Shore in the New Orleans area. Whether it's for birthday parties, baby celebrations, Villere's provides colorful floral displays for all. With a store full of fresh-cut flowers, exotic tropical flowers, orchids, roses, and even fruit baskets, our goal is to make your vision a reality. Villere's Florist, proudly serving Louisiana since 1969. Mr. Ed's Oyster Bar and Fish House has been shucking here since 1979. Located at 3117 21st Street in Metairie, Mr. Ed's Oyster Bar and Fish House offers raw, fried, and grilled oysters, as well as a range of Cajun and Creole dishes. Enjoy a dozen with a smile.
Good evening, New Orleans, and welcome to another edition of Inside New Orleans Sports. I'm your host, Eric Asher. Over the next hour, we'll talk a lot about the home teams, as we always do, the New Orleans Saints, also the streaking New Orleans Pelicans. We'll put a wrap on college basketball, and we'll talk about college baseball as well. So we got a full show for you tonight and a great panel. Two guys that I love having on my radio show. I love bringing on this show as well. Jude Young of 990 AM WGSO and CrescentCitySports.com. Mike Fazende joins me every single Friday on Inside New Orleans on Sports 1280. Gentlemen, welcome to the show. Thanks so much for being with us. Love having you guys down here. Let's tell a little bit of the folks a little bit about what you guys have going on. Jude, we'll start with you first.
Well, it's a pleasure to be here as always, and certainly we're busy at CrescentCitySports.com covering high school, college, and the pros all year long, and we're getting into our high school baseball coverage. Had our first live game this past Tuesday, and we'll have at least 10 more coming up into the postseason in May. So we hope that you check us out each and every day for that, plus analysis of the Pelicans run right now. Multiple writers covering that on a day-to-day basis. And the New Orleans Saints and free agency is such a big deal this time of year. It's good to be free to pay a little bit more attention to that, but it's not good to be done with the season as the voice of the UNO Privateers, making a run into the CBI with head coach Mark Schlesinger and a very young team that played really well in 2 games, and very unfortunate not to still be playing tonight in that tournament with a bright future moving forward. So keeping me busy between those two, and I'm looking forward to being busy again next year with the Privateers and continuing forward with CCS.
Mike, yes. Welcome back to the show. And again, I love Mike's take. He's with me every Friday. We started in radio together, and he's got a great blog as well when he gets to it. But his mock drafts, he's hit on quite a few mock drafts over the years with players that the Saints should have taken or taken. Mike, tell us about it.
I do a mock draft. I only do one because I do it about 2 weeks before the real draft. And because it takes me that long to research everybody, I can't spit one out every week.
And, you can't do it 1.0, 2.0, 3.0.
I would love to, but I don't have time. But and I'm also going to do my grades for the free agents. After the free agency period's over, I'll do grades on that.
Beautiful.
And then I'll have a lead up for the draft, and then I'll do my grades on the draft, and then training camps right after that.
Oh yeah, no doubt.
It won't be long.
No, it won't, and thank goodness.
It'll be on us before we know it.
Oh well, football's year round in this town. Yeah, football's year round in this town. You
yes,
know that.
It is.
Give the folks the spot for the blog, and of course
it's
when
Fazende on football. You can just Google that. It's under Google's umbrella of blogs. It's mefootball1.blogspot.com, but just Google Fazende on football, and it'll come up.
And every Friday, noon until 1. And sometimes we bleed over into the 1 o'clock hour. You can see Mike, or you can hear Mike on my television, on my radio show.
And I tweet it out when I do it, so it's on Twitter too.
There you go.
Michael Fazende.
And that's the folks will see that as we go forward. A lot to talk about. Let's start first with the Saints. Before we get into the players and free agency, give you guys an opportunity to talk about the passing of Tom Benson.
Well, certainly something that we've been thinking would be coming very soon, and once Mr. Benson went to the hospital with the flu-like symptoms, you had to figure it was only a matter of time. But at this point where we have visitation and the funeral this week, the public comment I want to make is something I said on my radio show, and I think it's the most important part for the average person here in the market that cares about the Saints and the Pelicans, and that is Mr. Benson was able to line all of his ducks in a row to make sure that after he's gone, now that he is gone, that both franchises were on stable ground with leadership that knows what needs to be done moving forward. We don't know what Gail Benson's going to be like as a leader because we haven't seen her in that position yet, but she's certainly learned from the best. There's no better owner that you could ask for, and you're certainly hearing it from plenty of players and former employees right now, than Tom Benson. So she's been able to observe that while also bringing something to the later years of his life, not only as an owner, but as a man. And it looks like the leadership that's helped build these franchises, particularly with the Saints' success, Dennis Lauscha, Mickey Loomis, they're all in place for the long term, and folks should be very comfortable with that, knowing that they can be fans and enjoy their teams, New Orleans teams, moving forward, because Mr. Benson made sure to take care of those family entanglements and make sure that New Orleans had its Saints and Pelicans, and gives us all plenty to report on for years to come. So in the media, we have to be happy.
Gives me something to blog about.
We're going to dive into that a little bit deeper. Mike, your thoughts on the passing of Tom Benson?
Well, it's a huge loss. I mean, he was an icon, an absolute legend in the sports world. You can't go anywhere in any NFL town and find somebody who does not know who Tom Benson is, and probably now in NBA towns. And he's going to leave a great legacy. Jude touched on a lot of it. You talked about Gail Benson. I think she did a masterful job of softening his image, because around Katrina, it took a hit with some of the things that happened that you've pointed out a few times. But I just think, I don't know that New Orleans comes back the way it does if Benson doesn't keep the Saints here. And then he takes over the Pelicans when they're in trouble, and he's got them stabilized. And other things he's done. I mean, there's philanthropic things with giving money to Tulane Sports and Brother Martin and Ochsner Hospital. I mean, all kind of things. So just a giant in this town, and one of the pillars that New Orleans was rebuilt on after Katrina. So much respect for Mr. Benson, and rest in peace.
You can't downplay all the philanthropic things that he did, the money that he's given away, especially in a post-Katrina New Orleans. You've mentioned a bunch of them. Nobody can downplay that. And of course, now we kind of turn the page here, and you're looking toward the future of these franchises. Now, Dennis Lauscha today said, and this has been the narrative that the Saints and Pelicans have been putting out, seamless transition. There will be nothing changed. We know that, again, Mr. Benson has been ill for a while. He was three weeks in ICU. He's had health problems that have been reoccurring over the last few years. So again, they've tried to put together a plan, a succession in place to make sure that the empire stays intact, that the teams, again, will stay in the possession of Gail Benson. We know the LeBlancs, the estranged family members of Tom Benson, Rita, Ryan, and Renee. In their court case, looks like they got most of the assets in Texas and some assets here in New Orleans. But even though they have shares of the team, they're non-voting shares at this point. And one thing Lauscha has pointed out continuously is that as long as Gail Benson is alive, that the Saints and Pelicans will be in New Orleans. There is a trust that is set up with Mickey Loomis, also Dennis Lauscha, Greg Bensel, and a few other individuals that will be on that trust. I know Gail Benson is involved in it now, but in case Mrs. Benson dies, or when she dies, that obviously at that point that will be something that will be undetermined or unknown if ultimately they can hold on to the franchises here in New Orleans. Now, I want to say this because I thought that Ed Daniels did a great job last night on the Sports Zone, in which he had a state attorney come on and they spoke about the tax implications of the death of Mr. Benson. And one of the things that was discussed was that because the teams and the empire is being moved from spouse to spouse, they don't have to worry about estate taxes. Everything is pretty much together on that. The question will come in is when Mrs. Benson dies, and this thing turns over the trust, then there will be some tax implications in terms of that. But he believes, the expert that was on Ed's show, that all that has been taken care of up to this point. So it looks like it's on solid financial footing. It looks like from a tax standpoint that the tax man won't be coming in like we've seen with so many other franchises outside of Louisiana. You know, franchises that were in family hands for decades, maybe since the inception of those franchises that had to be sold. Looks like that has been taken care of, and it looks like, at least at this point, even though the LeBlancs have the opportunity to sue once again and to contest the will, it looks like that at this point. Looks like, whether it's going to be done or not, that the Bensons have an ironclad will with the Archbishop of the city of New Orleans being the person that witnessed that. So with that said, and setting that table, let's talk about the future here on the football and basketball side. I've been critical of Mr. Benson at times, and I'm going to say rightly so. But as I've said on my radio show, and I'll say it on this TV show, as an owner of a professional sports team, franchise, both basketball and football, you couldn't ask for a better owner. And the reason why is he gave the individuals that ran the club, the people that he brought in, that he handpicked, that he groomed, or those that, again, had the responsibility of being in the front office, whether it's personnel or head coaching, he left those guys to do their jobs. He never meddled. He always made sure they had all the money they needed to spend. You never saw the Pelicans or the Saints not spending right up to the salary cap. He never said that you got to pick this guy, or this guy's got to be cut, or you can't run this play, or you can run that play. He's not Jerry Jones. The question is, what does Gail Benson do now? What kind of owner is Gail Benson? Will she be influenced from people outside, maybe in her circle? Is she going to, again, since this has been set forth and laid out as a plan that has worked in the past, will she allow Lauscha and Loomis and Bensel to handle the everyday activities of the clubs? And then, of course, when it comes to General Manager Del Demps and Jeff Ireland and Sean Payton on the football side, let them handle the football side and the personnel. I'll start with you, Jude, first. What are your thoughts? How does she handle this going forward?
Well, we know Gail Benson has final say. And she will be, we get the indication that she will be active enough in the day-to-day activities of the franchises to have say on some big decisions. But I think when we look at the big picture, I don't think she's going to fancy herself a football or basketball expert. I don't think she has any reason to go out on a limb, look at her background. We don't really know her, but what we do know of her is that she's a New Orleanian that now is essentially the queen of New Orleans. She's in a wonderful position, and there's nothing that needs to be done to change her day-to-day life, which is about as good as it gets in this market, right? She's happy to be here, and she should be happy the rest of her life, and she has trusted lieutenants running the business that, hey, she can step in and make decisions and put her stamp on some of the long-term vision, but I don't think it's going to change the day-to-day of the Saints being willing to have some dead money moving forward like they're trying to do right now in pursuit of big free agents and dealing with Drew Brees' contract probably from year to year the rest of the way. And on the Pelicans side, big decision with DeMarcus Cousins in the offseason. If this season ends as well as it appears it might, and this team shows that, hey, you add Cousins back in and they can be a title contender, I would expect the Pelicans under Gail Benson's leadership with her stamp of approval not only to stay what they already are above the salary cap, but maybe go a little bit into luxury tax land if she thinks the team can be a contender. Because her bottom line, the total of the two franchises and her setup in total, taking the estate of Tom Benson, that's her responsibility. I think she's fine financially, and she trusts the people running the show to say, hey, I think this is a gamble worth taking to try to win, because she's seen it done by Mr. Benson. Why would she want to change what works with the man who taught her how to run the biggest of businesses?
Yeah, you know, I think he makes a great point. We don't know Gail Benson. I mean, we really don't know her. We know, you know, the woman who's been on the arm of Tom Benson. We know a little bit about her background, but nobody really knows Gail Benson, at least, you know, when that's not in her inner circle. The average New Orleanian would know her as Tom Benson's wife. Mike, what do you think happens? Do you think it's status quo, or do you think that she takes more of a prominent role?
I'm just guessing.
Speculating. Of course, we all are. Nobody knows.
Who knows? I mean, all I can say is she has this very gentle personality, soft, sweet, but something tells me behind the scenes she's a very strong person. I mean, she got Rita and company out of the picture, and they were entrenched in the picture until really she started. I think they kind of got that ball rolling. I don't know, but I just suspect.
There was a few of some type.
So I think she's tough. I think she's extremely smart. And I think that we can rest easy knowing that she's a New Orleanian, as June said. She doesn't want to move the teams anywhere. And I think she will have a plan in place should something happen to her to keep both teams here. And I just think that she will hire people like the Benson model. Mm-hmm. Hire people you trust, give them the space to run it, and then step in as you see fit if you think something needs to be done. And I don't think she would have any trouble stepping in and maybe having to fire somebody or making a big decision with Boogie Cousins or something like that. So I have good feelings about it. She hasn't shown anything to me to make me worried.
And you can look at what changes were made by Tom Benson with her in his life, and that is he was more philanthropic.
Yes.
And those initiatives, you have to believe, were spurred on by her talking about leaving a legacy and making your community better. Not only that, but the football community, the Canton Stadium, the community in San Antonio. And we know it's a touchy subject locally, but a lot of money given in that community, including for a football stadium at Incarnate Word.
Right.
So that's where he made a big chunk of his fortune in the car business. So again, I'm sure she was pushing that every step of the way, and I think when we see her in public, most of the time it's going to be for community initiatives and maybe starting nonprofit type outfits that help certain needs, because she probably knows that a lot more than she knows football or basketball. So go with what you know, and just like she helped Mr. Benson cement his legacy as a very positive one in this area, I think she's going to want to do that individually for herself.
Yeah, and I would agree with you, because I think that is going to be a big part of this going forward. Yeah, you want to win championships. That's the goal here. You're an owner of professional franchises. But again, the vast empire that Tom Benson built and the dollars that again, he has banked over the years, they've given away a lot of that money. I expect her to again, even be more philanthropic going forward and, again, making her mark out there. And again, I think that's a good thing for New Orleans going forward, because honestly, we need all the help we can get at this point. Still recovering from the largest man-made disaster in the history of this country, a.k.a. Hurricane Katrina. Let's shift gears now to on the field and free agency. And I want to start with Ndamukong Suh, because everybody seems to be enamored with Ndamukong Suh, the possibility of bringing him in, how he can solidify the middle of the defensive line. There's not a quote-unquote player of Ndamukong Suh's talent on the middle of that line, although Sheldon Rankins may feel a little bit put off by that, because, again, he's a young player who has a lot in front of him.
But he's not as good as Suh.
No, he's not. No, he's not. He's not right now. There's no doubt. Here's the deal. I read an article and talked about it on my radio show today, beat writer for the Miami Dolphins, who went into why the Dolphins ultimately let go Jarvis Landry and Ndamukong Suh. And it was about culture change. It was about locker room. It was about guys that were worried about me and my stats as opposed to worrying about the team. And one thing that this writer kept coming back to is, again, that the individual that Suh is, and how Suh, again, even though he softened every year he was in Miami and became less of maybe a player that was an individual, when things got tough or things didn't go his way, went back to, again, Suh first, team second. They ate $22 million in dead money to let him go. Now, he is still a player that can dominate. And rather than have him in their locker room, they let him go and they're eating $22 million over the next 2 years. This is a young locker room. This is a locker room with players from their second year to maybe their fourth or fifth year. You've got just one holdover from the Super Bowl team, which is Drew Brees. Other than that, you've got guys that have learned under the culture from other players that have passed on what the Peyton way, what he wants out of his team. The question is, can the Saints, being what it seems to be pretty close to a championship, at least on paper, can they afford a Ndamukong Suh? And I'm not talking about from the money standpoint. I'm talking about, can they afford him in the locker room?
I'm more concerned about the dollars and cents than whether he's going to fit into the locker room, because I did read that article, and I do understand the Miami Dolphin perspective, but I also look at an entire organization that's been built upon, from ownership on down, on names and more of a fantasy football look at how you put together a roster, as opposed to building a roster with character, and something that was learned here 4 years ago when the Saints had to make major changes. They wanted to bring Jimmy Graham back. It wasn't like Jimmy Graham wasn't a good football player. Maybe a a little bit of a prima donna? And can we afford to keep paying a tight end for a mediocre football team at 8 figures? We can't. So we're moving forward and we're changing. The Dolphins are trying to figure out who their leaders are. They don't have a Drew Brees at quarterback from a talent perspective or a leadership perspective. Last year they were rolling with Jay Cutler after an injury to their starter, Ryan Tannehill. So that tells you where that organization is. They've had a lot of talent go through there, but they haven't been able to do more than be mediocre in a division that, yes, has had the Patriots, but it's also had 2 other mediocre franchises. They've been not able to take advantage of that much at all. One wild card appearance in recent memory. So if you're Sue, you're upset, you're getting up in years, there's no other leadership in the locker room. The best players happen to be guys that are a little bit fiery, like you mentioned, Landry. So it's just a bad mix. There's a reason why the Rams, the Titans, and the Saints have made strong pushes for Ndamukong Suh, because he's a difference maker, and these are playoff teams trying to get over the hump to a Super Bowl. I'll trust that many front offices to think it's more of a Dolphins problem than it is a Suh problem. And I think also that Suh's not getting the money offers he was expecting, so he is being punished a little bit in the open market. Still as dominant as it gets at his position, but he won't be paid like it, and the Saints are hoping that he won't be paid like it on this roster with what could happen this season.
So if the money's right, you'd bring him in, you'd give him a contract, even if it's just a 1-year deal, you'd have Ndamukong Suh.
Especially a 1-year deal. That would be the best case scenario for the Saints, because if you're worried about him being on his best behavior, the 1-year deal is the way to do it. I don't think Sheldon Rankins would be upset no matter how many years and how much money it's going to make him a better player. As much as he was double-teamed this year, the Saints are telling you we need to help Sheldon Rankins. We want to help Cam Jordan get more single blocking and be more dominant no matter where you line him up. It's going to make everybody better if you can get Suh, just like the Rams have Aaron Donald, but they still want Ndamukong Suh because he's that good and can change a defense that much.
Mike, what's your take?
Yeah, I mean, as you were describing the article, it reminded me of the 2014 Saints
With Junior Gillette, yeah.
with the fire sale. Yeah. We're getting rid of all the bad personalities that the Saints didn't like in their locker room. And I'm not sure. I don't know what happened in Miami's locker room with Jarvis Landry or Ndamukong Suh, but I know a lot of times when teams aren't winning, when they think they should be, players lash out. I mean, that's just the way it is. Competitive people lash out. And, it's not, sometimes you want an athlete to be more selfish because they know that if you get me the ball or if you let me play, then we have a better chance of winning. So I'm not too concerned about that part of it. I think Ndamukong Suh is an incredible competitor, incredible talent. He gets a little. What would concern me more about what happens on the field, because he loses his mind sometimes. He'll kick somebody in the head, step on them, and get a 15-yard penalty, maybe lose a game or something like that. So get suspended for a game. But there's no question about it. His talent warrants a shot. I mean, I would definitely give it. I mean, if you could do a Nick Fairley deal, and it kind of reminds you of the Nick Fairley situation, where you give him that 1 year to play for a better contract, and then you'll get his best. So that could be the perfect. I don't know if he'll go for that, to be honest with you, but that would be the ideal situation. But even if it's a 3-year deal, a 4-year deal with the 4th year kind of goes away, depending on how well you're playing, something like that. But I would definitely, he's too good of a player to just say, oh, he had a bad time in the locker room. But this would be his 3rd locker room.
Right.
So there could be something to that.
Right. Culture in the locker room matters, though. And he was with a non-winner with Detroit, a team that struggles to get over the hump.
Exactly.
And then clearly a Miami team, and let's put it this way to go back to the comparison of what the Saints are now versus what Miami is. When the Saints were making that purge of personalities in the locker room, they went and got rid of a very affordable receiver named Kenny Stills, who was considered to be a me guy. Where did he wind up? Miami was more than happy to take him. How's that worked out? He's been an okay player, but just another piece in the mix that's probably not a positive to trying to build a playoff team and a winner.
Mike, I'll start with you. Demario Davis, 3 years, $24 million. It was originally reported as $18 million guaranteed. It's really $19 million guaranteed. Played very, very well for the Jets. He's a tackling machine, man. What are your thoughts on Davis?
I like Davis. I think the Saints need another linebacker. The Saints linebackers were injury prone last season. You lost Klein. You lost Stupar. Who am I missing? I know there's somebody else they lost. But Anzalone. A guy who had injury problems in college. So they definitely needed another, and a great athlete at linebacker. Great against the run, decent against the short passing game, kind of gets lost beyond 10 yards, past the line of scrimmage.
Sure.
But I think he'd be a great pickup. Great teammate, a good player, another weapon for another toy for Dennis Allen in the defense, and Mike Nolan. Get under Mike Nolan's tutelage, whose linebacking crew improved incredibly from Mike Nolan to Joe Vitt.
Right.
So I like it.
When you look at what the Saints are trying to do, they're looking for these free agents that sometimes are bargains and sometimes it's going to cost a pretty penny, but you want guys that are entering their prime no matter when that prime is. Remember the Jets, to allow a Demario Davis to be available, they went for an Avery Williamson who's a high-ticket, younger free agent.
Yes.
The Jets aren't close to winning and contending right now, so they went for the 26-year-old. The Saints went for a guy that started with the Jets, was traded to the Browns, and then traded back to the Jets. So if you do a little research and you see the interviews and wonder why when he came back to New York he had his best year, he said, quite frankly, it was about Demario Davis. He figured out that he needed to put in extra work. He needed to be more of a leader. He needed to make sure it was a year-round job. So he now understands what it takes to be successful, and he wants to be as successful as possible. He wants to be a Pro Bowl player and to win in the postseason. So seeing that and looking in his eyes and seeing how genuine it was, the Saints saw a guy whose production improved, but also his attitude improved, and he has the athleticism to be a real playmaker for this team and somebody that can plug in different spots and try to mix and match. I think they want him in the middle, but if it doesn't work out that way, A.J. Klein's versatile as well. You mentioned the injuries, and it opens up possibilities in the draft to try to draft the best player in the first round. If it winds up being a linebacker, that's just more help there.
Yeah, I mean, if you lost your two best linebackers to injury, both injuries cost the rest of the season from that point forward. I mean, and then to be able to bring in a guy like Davis, I mean, it's just to me, it's a great move.
Well, I love it.
It adds insurance.
He's been durable, too.
Right.
And you can keep guys, if they stay healthy, you can keep them fresh. You can rotate them.
Right. Well, and the one thing that I've talked about on this show and on the radio show is raising the athleticism of the linebackers. Guys that are quicker, faster, more athletic. You like A.J. Klein, you like Manti Te'o, but you want maybe guys that have the athleticism of an Anzalone, okay?
But Manti Te'o had a great season.
He really
last year.
did. Right. No, he did.
And he
really
stepped up when
Yes.
they needed somebody to step up.
But you like to have guys that can push those guys.
But yes, but he's so smart, Te'o. He's athletic enough to make plays near the line of scrimmage. But that's just, the Saints defensive line played pretty well in the middle.
True.
And that helped him.
No doubt, no doubt. Mike, I'll ask you about Patrick Robinson, 4 years, $20 million, $10 million guaranteed. I've talked about it on the show. We talked about it last week on the radio show. He comes back really to New Orleans, a finished product. He looked like he was destined to play the nickel his last year in New Orleans. You and I discussed it on the radio show. This is the spot he needs to be in. He ends up leaving in free agency. Afof a lot of fans were glad to see him go because of the problems that he had here in New Orleans, kind of learning how to be a pro. Coming to New Orleans after playing behind a pretty darn good defense in Philadelphia.
He left a bad defense in New Orleans, and he's returning to a pretty good defense, especially front seven when everybody's healthy. So I think it's a good deal for him. I'm not so sure it's a great deal for the Saints. He played well when he was. I will say this: he did play well when he was on a good defense in Philly. He didn't play so well on a bad defense in Indianapolis, or an average defense. So. We'll see how that works. I think the Saints sign a guy like him. It's like the chips are in. They're going for a Super Bowl run. They don't want to draft a guy. We were talking before the show. Dante Jackson would be around projected late on the second or third round with the Saints, around where the Saints are picking. I think the third round. But I don't think the Saints want to bring in a rookie and train him when they can bring in a guy like Robinson and plug him in at the nickel. And then you have Lattimore and Ken Crawley, who I think is a better player.
You like Crawley?
I like him. I don't love him, but I like him as a solid NFL corner on the opposite side of Lattimore. And if you bring in a P-Rob who's going to nail down that nickel spot, you got a real good secondary.
Yeah. Your thoughts?
I think front offices look at, and certainly the Saints do, the nickel cornerback position as a skill position. We talk about skill positions on both sides of the ball. Now we're talking about cover corners, and the slot is a different set of skills unto itself. And the Saints realize, they look at their roster and said, we don't have anybody that fits this. Even if P.J. Williams trying to fill in there, he's better off on the outside competing with Ken Crawley. You don't want to have to use Marshawn Lattimore there because you want him outside on that number one receiver as much as possible. Patrick Robinson Robinson found his niche. He loved New Orleans. He wanted to come back. I call it unfinished business. That's the type of guy you want that's coming off of success, winning a Super Bowl, and he had to take the long route. And it's funny, the Saints have had some bad luck with first-round picks that wound up being good players in the league. Going back, I remember Mark Fields. Saints never got the benefit of the good Mark Fields. Saints haven't gotten the benefit of a very good Malcolm Jenkins. At least now, when they're ready to contend, Patrick Robinson's here coming to fill a certain role that you know that he's good enough to do for a team that won a Super Bowl. He probably played his best football in the 2 playoff games against teams the Saints are going to have to go through. He did well against the Falcons. He did extremely well against a Vikings team that gave the Saints fits in the slot. There you go. It's a perfect fit, and I think the money's more than reasonable.
Talk about Tom Savage.
Tom Savage is an interesting signing because I think that they want him beat out somehow, some way, and I don't know if it's Taysom Hill. We'll have to see moving forward. But they needed somebody that could go in and had enough experience to take snaps if something happens to Drew Brees in a game. If something happens to Drew Brees that costs you multiple games, hey, look, you're in trouble at this point. But Savage has been there on a team that's been a playoff contender, that's played in the postseason. He's taken a beating and come back to be a leader, and he's a more accurate passer from what I've seen than Chase Daniel. He's not as mobile, but the Saints aren't looking for quarterbacks that can run. They're looking for quarterbacks that can run the system. So for what, $2 million? I mean, what can you say? He's a nice safety net, just in case the Saints don't go for a quarterback in this draft. And as many picks as they have, I think we all believe that there's more of an impetus for Sean Payton to do that as we watch Drew Brees continue to sign these 2-year contracts that are really just 1-year deals, knowing the end could be near at any time.
Mike, what's your thoughts on Tom Savage?
I just think Jude likes him a lot more than I do. I think he's just an average quarterback. I mean, listen, he's a backup quarterback.
Well, if he's an average quarterback, then that's a win. I'm not even saying he's an average quarterback. We're talking about backups here for $2 million.
Exactly.
So you call him an average backup?
An average backup.
There we go.
Luke McCown. I think Luke McCown's probably a little bit better than he is, simply because he was in the Saints system a lot longer than Tom Savage would be, should he have to step in. But let's face it, if anybody has to step in for Drew Brees for an extended period of time, it's trouble.
Yes.
You're not going to have a great season.
And the Saints may not be done. After the draft, there could still be backup caliber guys out there. Bring another one in.
And if a quarterback falls to 27, don't be shocked.
I heard you guys talking before the show. You think?
Well, I'm just saying I'm looking at the prospect list, and I'm looking what might be available around 27. And nothing at a position of need, a tight end, a defensive end, really jumps off the page at you. There's guys there that you can pick and justify picking them, but if Lamar Jackson falls to you, do you pass him up at 27, a talent like that? Or even a Baker Mayfield? Some mocks still have him falling to 27.
I think those mocks are way off, though.
And listen, but if you pick a guy in that spot, you get that extra year because he's in first round.
Yeah, that 5th round.
And you can let him sit a year.
That 5th-year option,
Or you can shop that pick and trade back away. The Saints don't do that.
They don't do that.
Well,
they trade up.
If there's a year, though, Jude.
Right.
I mean, I love 27.
I'd love for him to get back in that second round.
That's what I'd like to see, too. I mean, again, you got teams that fall in love with players. You lose the 5th-year option. That hurts you a little bit. Okay, but it really hurts you only really for a quarterback, because a quarterback is going to sit behind Brees for at least a couple of years.
Right.
If you're going to pick a quarterback, you got to pick him in the first round because you want him for 5 years. But man, if you can parlay that 27th pick in the first round into multiple picks, get you back in the second round, maybe in the third rounder, I wouldn't be opposed to doing it, and I'm sure the Saints wouldn't be opposed to it either. Unless there's somebody that just, like we always see, they just drop and you say to yourself, wait a minute, how's that player there?
Right. You're allowed to trade back early and then trade back up later.
Yeah.
To accumulate picks and play the board. And I wish the Saints would be more aggressive about that unless they're absolutely in love with a player. At a pick like number 27, they better love a guy versus knowing, hey, we don't really probably want to pull the trigger, say, on a tight end at 27, but we wouldn't mind at 40. And that extra year, and maybe there is a quarterback you're not sure about, somebody wants to trade up. At least be open to it. But again, it just hasn't been the MO of Sean Payton. He's aggressive. Mickey Loomis clearly shares the same philosophy, so I'm not going to expect it to happen and be shocked if it finally does.
You're watching Inside New Orleans Sports. Our guest tonight, Jude Young of CrestCitySports.com and 990 AM WGSO. Mike Fazende joins me every Friday, noon until 1 on Sports 1280. Also, he's got a great blog, Fazende on Football. I'm your host, Eric Asher. We'll be right back after these messages.
Conditioning, Heating, and Refrigeration has been family-owned and operated since 1989. Burkhardt has energy-efficient solutions and offers brands such as Mitsubishi ductless AC units and Amana, the only manufacturer with a lifetime unit replacement warranty. Burkhardt's offers maintenance bundle packages that include servicing your AC, generator, and tankless water heater. For more information on the services Burkhardt's provides, visit acpromise.com. Burkhardt's Air Conditioning, Heating, and Refrigeration, providing comfort for life.
Located at 3701 Iberville Street in Mid-City is Katie's Restaurant and Bar. Open 7 days a week, Katie's offers daily specials for lunch, dinner, and Sunday brunch. Serving New Orleans cuisine such as fried shrimp platters, grilled redfish, and a fully stocked bar. And don't forget about our expanded event seating and local entertainment. Featured on the Best of Food Network's diners, drive-ins, and dives, Katie's Restaurant and Bar. Amco Fence, locally owned and operated since 1976. Fully licensed and insured and a member of the BBB, Amco serves both residential and commercial customers. If you're looking to repair, replace, or install a fence for security or aesthetic reasons, Amco Fence supplies wooden, metal, chain link, vinyl, and ornamental or automatic gates. Amco aims to satisfy your fencing needs. Amco Fence, 504-468-9559 or amcofencecompany.com.
Welcome back to Inside New Orleans Sports. Thanks so much for watching the program each and every week here on WLAE-TV or our friends at Pelican Sports Television. We appreciate you tuning in. Remember, you can always check us out at ericasher.com as well. Jude Young is with us. Also, Mike Fazende. Great panel tonight. We're going to talk a little bit of Saints, more about the Saints. We'll jump into Pels, and we'll do some college athletics. We'll talk basketball and football, basketball and baseball, on the collegiate level. All right, guys, quick rapid fire round. If I get you to go quickly. Re-signing of Jermai Bushrod.
I think it's a great signing because he's played enough at guard now that he can be that Swiss Army knife that fills in at two different spots. But I'm sure they're going to address this in the draft. They need another young player, and I don't think Bushrod's going to be able to fill in at the level of Sineo Calamete, who deserves his chance to start in Houston. So, again, good signing, but they need more there.
Yeah, I think an offensive lineman will be drafted as well. And I like the signing. He's familiar with the system. He's only got a year or two left in his career. And it's a chance for him to come in on a good team and really make another push to a Super Bowl where he can really contribute, because the offensive line of the Saints, that's another position that goes through a lot of injuries. Mm-hmm. And they've been able to rotate those guys when one guy goes down and keep on rolling. And I think it's at least equal to a healthy Zach Street, maybe even a little more athletic.
Kurt Coleman, your thoughts?
I like it. I like experience as a safety. He's kind of like the Roman Harper signing that Carolina made a few years ago, and that almost propelled them into the Super Bowl because he brought that veteran leadership to that secondary behind Luke Kuechly and those guys up front. But I like Kurt Coleman's savvy. I like his NFL, his football IQ, range as a safety. He's kind of the opposite of Kenny Vaccaro. He's better in pass coverage than he is against the run.
It's interesting that Coleman has one bad year in Carolina for whatever reason that make a push to keep him. They cut him loose, in fact.
Yes.
But I think he's somebody that, as you mentioned, does have that savvy and ball skills that you look for, can help out Marcus Williams, help teach him and develop him further as a teammate, which is always good to have a veteran like that they haven't really had. That's a guy who can play deep center field, but he can also match up in the slot, play around the line of scrimmage. The price is right, and you know players in your division in free agency better than you know anybody else, so you trust the Saints on this one.
Alex Okafor, 2 years, $10 million.
That seems like a steal to me. I'm a little surprised that Okafor didn't get a little bit more based on the rumors of the people that were interested at first, but maybe he feels a little bit of loyalty as far as getting the opportunity with the Saints, a comfort level at this point. The Saints could have gotten a steal of a deal, but again, it's an Achilles, so you take into account that this is an edge pass rusher and the push-off issue there. How long will he take to get back to truly 100%? He may not be the same player early in the season than he is late in the season, and now he has a bit of a security blanket.
Yeah, I like it too. I mean, when he's healthy, he's an excellent pass rusher and disruptor of the quarterback. So I like the signing. If he can, like Jude said, we can get him healthy. The Saints can get him healthy midway, 100% midway on in the season when they're trying to make a push. I think it'd be great. Tampa just traded for Jason Pierre-Paul from the Giants.
Yes.
So Other teams are shoring up their edge rushers, so I think it's a good move.
Yeah.
You would hate to see Okafor end up on a division rival.
Right, and I think he visited Tampa Bay.
Right, exactly.
Of course,
and they've been really active, and they need pass rush.
Really good young talent, and
Yeah.
one of these days they're going to put it together.
Yeah, no, you're right there.
And they're going to be a tough force.
There's got to be a weird joke about 8 good fingers and 1 bad Achilles here, but I don't know it, so I'm just going to let that go when it comes to
the
Pierre
Saints haven't
Paul.
done too well with Achilles this year as well. The Saints nor the Pels. I'd be remiss if I didn't ask you guys about Breeze's contract. Quickly, your thoughts.
Oh, I mean, he's the franchise. You got to bring him back. I think they got a really good deal.
I think they got a great deal.
Well, $25 million for 2 years.
Yeah.
He could have maybe pushed for more, and I mean, especially with the Vikings showing interest, he could have leveraged that for more money. But I think he's like, I'm negotiating. They like $25 million. All my other businesses I have going on here in the city and looking to expand. I think it's a great deal for the Saints. Drew Brees is still Drew Brees. He hasn't lost anything. And if anything, he's gotten a little better because of the running game behind him. And if they can get him a little more speed at wide receiver, look out.
I think it's a bigger win for the Saints, and it was clearly a sacrifice by Drew Brees made because the Saints have made themselves contenders again. It allows the Saints to play it year to year, at least for another, and like I said earlier, I think that's going to be how it's played between Brees and the franchise for the rest of his career. So big win for the Saints, and it gives them more wiggle room this year to continue to add talent.
And we won't have to hear on our radio shows anymore how greedy Brees is, right? I mean, because he took the hometown discount. I didn't think he would take the hometown discount.
I've never said that about
No, I didn't say you
Brees.
said it, but I'm saying callers have called in and said it.
Oh, I know, but I'm just saying, as far as I'm concerned.
No, he deserves every nickel he gets.
Every nickel he got.
No, I agree.
No doubt.
Sure.
Let's shift to the Pelicans. Surprisingly, again, playing very, very well in a post-Boogie Cousins season. The second half of the season has really been entertaining to watch. A totally different team. They're 42-30 at the time of this live show. They're taking on the Los Angeles Lakers tonight in the Smoothie King Center Thursday night. Right now they're 5th in the West, but you got to wake up in the morning and kind of see what the standings are from day to day. 4th game in 5 nights. They beat Indiana last night, which don't glaze over that win against Indiana.
Right.
96-92. They won, scoring less than 100 points, and Indiana is a pretty darn good basketball team, and they did it without Drew Holiday. They were a little fatigued and sloppy early. They played as good of a fourth quarter as I've seen them play all season long. They had 17 turnovers and gave up 13 offensive rebounds in the first 3 quarters. In the fourth quarter, they only gave up they only had 3 turnovers and only gave up 2 offensive. They only 2 offensive rebounds to the Pacers. Everyone's been contributing. Check Diallo, Etuan Moore, Ian Clark, outside of Drew Holiday and Anthony Davis. Seems like every night, Mirotic, someone else is stepping up. This team is playing pretty good basketball right now, pretty entertaining basketball. Jude, your thoughts on the Pels with after tonight? A 10-game sprint to the playoffs, and I'm going to get into that schedule in a minute, but your thoughts?
Yeah, they play in the Western Conference, so it's going to be a tough stretch. We know that, but you brought up all these players that have been able to step up, just like the past game in the fourth quarter. That's why the record of the Pelicans is so much better this year than in recent seasons. In close games late, 5 points or less, where we joke all the time about the NBA. You don't really need to turn on the game to the last 5 minutes. Well, that's when games are won against good teams and even bad teams having a good night, and the Pelicans have come out on top enough to put themselves in the postseason discussion. And like David Grubb writes for CrescentCitySports.com today, it's all about, at this point, the bench being able to step up around your stars. At this point, Drew Holiday more often than not plays like a star. Anthony Davis is a superstar, but everybody else is able to fill in to the point where you can match up against different opponents in the final minutes of games, and they're good enough to step up and make key plays for you to win those games. Dell Demps may not be GM of the year in the NBA, but if there were an award for most improved GM, he's figured it out. He's probably gotten more chances than most GMs should, but he's figured it out. And this is a team that has depth, and they're doing this without DeMarcus Cousins, and you can't stress that enough.
You know, I agree with you. Look, I've said it. I was Dell Demps' biggest cheerleader when he got here, and I became his biggest detractor. Give him all the credit in the world on what he's been able to do this season.
You have to give him the credit.
Got to.
He assembled this team, and it's a really good team. And the great thing about different guys stepping up is it's different guys. One night it's Diallo, one night it's Moore, Clark. So you know if the Pelicans need somebody to step up, and one of those guys, if it's usually just one other guy and he's not playing well, but now it can be anybody. And I love the fact, with saying all of that Anthony Davis is taking over in the fourth quarter. And it's kind of been my issue with him over the past few years. He's been a great player, but taking over a game and putting it on his shoulders, and he's doing that now.
Yeah.
I love it.
Last night was an interesting game because it was a grinder.
Right.
And scoring under 100 points and winning because, again, if they make the playoffs, and I assume they are going to make the playoffs, that's the type of games you're going to have. You're going to have half court. You're playing a team in a series. They know your plays. They know your spots. They're going to try to take away your strengths, and they're going to go into a grind. And they were able to win a grind game last night.
And maturity is a big reason why you're able to win games like that, because this roster understands it doesn't matter what the scoreboard says. It matters the differential at the given time. We're up 3, we're down 3, we need to make a play, and you have to keep your poise. And there's enough veteran leadership there now, it appears. I think Rajon Rondo makes a difference. I think behind the scenes, when he's been involved just in the ear of Anthony Davis, that DeMarcus Cousins made a huge difference to keep this thing going this year. There's enough of that and guys who understand their roles, and I think they enjoy playing with one another. I didn't mention Solomon Hill being back. Right. There's another guy who can help you get some defensive stops, who's just another piece to the puzzle. That this game that you're going to look at Alvin Gentry and say, hey, can you do this in the postseason now? Because he's proven that he can piece it together and have a winning team and deal with adversity in the regular season. And he's another guy we've given a lot of grief to. Yeah. He's deserved it.
I agree.
But everybody's growing on the job and given a lot of reason to be optimistic.
He gets a lot of credit because, again, realizing, look, they had to change things at mid-season. They were, a twin tower team with everything flowing through Boogie Cousins, turning the ball over more than any other team in the NBA. Now they've moved up. I think they have the 8th fewest turnovers in the league right now in a post-Boogie Cousins season, and they've had to change the whole dynamics of this team on the fly. Give a lot of credit to Alvin Gentry and his coaching staff for being able to do that. Mike, we talked about a murderer's road for the Saints on their schedule. You know, you have Los Angeles Lakers tonight. The only two other teams on the schedule sub 500 would be Memphis and Phoenix. You got Houston, Portland, Cleveland, Golden State, Oklahoma City, San Antonio, and the Los Angeles Clippers, along with, again, Memphis, Los Angeles, and Phoenix on this last 11-game stretch.
I mean, listen, it's tough. Houston, Portland, Golden State, San Antonio. You saw what happened the last time they played San Antonio. Anthony Davis wasn't really getting a lot of help from the referees. I think that's what prompted Alvin Gentry to have his post-game tirade, which was not after the San Antonio game, if I remember. It was after another game.
It was after the Boston game? Houston game.
Houston game.
But, it's just tough. I mean, but one thing about the Pelicans, and Jude touched on it, is they now have they have poise in late in games, where it used to be if they had a lead and they lost it, they were going to a tank. Now they understand they can regroup and step up their game. They can rely on Anthony Davis to take the game over if they need to, and so it's going to be great to see. It's going to be a great test to watch how much they've grown in this stretch against these teams who are playoff. You know, they're good teams this year, but they're traditionally good teams.
And I think they've learned something about themselves as well. I think if they do re-sign Boogie Cousins, and I expect them to do because they almost have to because of the salary cap implications, if Boogie chooses to come back and everything, all indications are he is going to want to come back, you don't flow the offense through him anymore. And I think that was one of the big problems they had in the first part of the season with the turnovers and the stagnant offense. This is the type of offense you want to see run, and hopefully that's something that we'll see going forward.
And I think he'll appreciate coming back from a serious injury, not having to be the guy.
Right.
He usually wants the ball in his hands. He wants to be a point forward of sorts. But at least this time he's seeing the team win without him, and he wants to be a piece moving forward to win. I think that's going to help him because he's been just hungry to be in a winning locker room, and his little bit of influence and what's going on without him proves that he has a winning locker room now to be a part of. Look, down the stretch, we mentioned these 10 games. There's not that much pressure on the Pelicans. It's tough, but if they go 500, they probably make the playoffs, and we've talked about all year, that's a big win. But we'll see how mature they are, how hungry they are, because if they can go 7-3, 8-2, they could potentially get up to that 4th spot or stay in that 4th spot and be
doable.
Home court advantage.
It's very doable to win 7 out of the last 10.
Well, and you like Diallo Gallo and you like Clark and you like some of these guys that you haven't seen a lot out of during the season emerging now and feeling comfortable within their games and realizing where their role is and understanding this is how many minutes I'm going to play a night and this is what I need to do when I get on the court. And these guys have made a big difference. Let's head to the phone lines. Let's head to David in Houma. David, welcome to Inside New Orleans Sports. Hey, David.
Thanks for having me on the show, guys.
Thank you.
Doing it on Twitter. Got a question. Does signing DeMario Davis preclude us from taking somebody like Leighton Vander Esch? And what about Taven Bryan as a defensive tackle?
Thank you. Appreciate the phone call. Guys, I think the more athletes and the players that you can add, the better.
Did having two proven offensive tackles as starters keep the Saints from taking one late in the first round last year? No. If they have a highly rated linebacker, you mentioned Van Der Esch, I really like Rashaan Evans from Alabama and think he's underrated by most of these mock drafts I've seen. If they think that's a piece that fits, the Saints are going to pull that trigger because we mentioned Alex Anzalone is a guy that if he's healthy, he's a starter. But he has never been healthy in his football career as a linebacker dating back to college. So they could use another athlete and have a little bit more there as far as overall athleticism goes, because what happens if you lose a DeMario Davis? You're still at the same deficit where you're trying to make average at best linebackers fit to win versus having guys who make plays and make a difference. So I wouldn't be surprised at all. And Taven Bryan's a name that keeps coming up, but you mentioned it. He's a lot like Trey Hendrickson, and I don't know if they need another guy who's more of a versatile player than somebody who can come in at a certain spot, whether he's a three technique or an edge rusher, and make a difference. But if the Saints have him higher rated on the board than everybody else, we've seen what they do. They're going to take him.
Mike, you take.
If Van Der Esch is there at 27, the Saints should jump on. And same with Evans. I mean, those two guys, Evans comes from a football factory, linebacker factory, and Van Der Esch has made himself, I think he came on as a wide receiver or quarterback, right?
A walk-on at that.
A walk-on, and he's made himself a number one draft pick prospect at linebacker. So you know he's got the work ethic, the athletic ability, and the intelligence to succeed. And I think that those two guys would be, one of those two guys, if they're there, then the Saints should take.
What about the other kid that he was talking about?
Taven Bryan.
Well, Jude mentioned it. He kind of reminds me of Trey Hendrickson, who you got in the third round last season. So a talent like that at 27, I'm not sure you would take. You would.
And does he fit in more as a 3-4 defensive end versus what the Saints run? That's the question there.
Back to Houma and Greg. Greg, welcome to Inside New Orleans Sports. Hey, Greg.
Hey guys, my question is what's the story on Kobe Fleener? I thought a couple of months ago he was going to get canned, and then now all of a sudden I hear he's back on with the team, but yet they're still looking at tight ends in the draft. So I need your opinion on that. Hang up and listen.
Thanks. Well, first of all, you cannot waive a player injured, and he's still got the concussion issues, and that was the reason why they gave him the $3.4 million bonus that he was going to get on the first day of the NFL season. He could still be a post-June 1st cut if they want to cut him, but if they don't go out and get a veteran tight end, next year is the year in which they really can soften the blow in terms of the cap hit, not this season. So I wouldn't be surprised to see him come back. If they would have gotten a Jimmy Graham, more than likely Kobe Fleener would be on the street post-June 1st.
Right. I don't think they wanted him to be part of the plans necessarily, but Eric laid out the reasons why he is. And at this point, we'll have to see what works out. There's not that much left out there at tight end in free agency at this point, but the draft appears to be reasonably deep. If the Saints pick somebody, even if it is in the first round, which may be reaching depending on some of the names we're hearing, but if they do pull the trigger on somebody that they think can develop and be a contributor this season, then they may then cut ties with Fleener. But at this point, can they afford to? I mean, they have Josh Hill and they have Hooman, and Hooman's a third tight end blocker, and Josh Hill is, well, he's a guy. He's a versatile fill-in guy. They don't really have a number one, and Fleener may wind up retiring too at this point because of the concussion issue, and you've got to let that play out.
Yeah, Mike, you got to take?
Yeah, I would be surprised to see Fleener back, either waived, injury settlement or retire. Because there's a few tight ends in the draft that you can pick, either at 27 or the Saints trade back into the second round. Mike Gesicki's one of them. Dallas Goedert may be there. He may be there. The kid from South Carolina.
Hayden Hurst,
Hayden Hurst. So there's some tight ends that'll be available. I like Mike Gesicki, I think, more than like these scouting reports do. But I just think He's a tall guy. He's got a great catch radius. He can get down the field, but he's not a great run blocker.
Right.
But he also was playing on a team with the best running back in the
best
draft.
running back
probably
in the draft,
should
right.
go number one if teams didn't need quarterback. So he must not be that bad of a blocker.
Let's talk college baseball. We get to college basketball before we finish up. First of all, your thoughts. Let's talk Tigers first. Your thoughts on where the Tigers are.
I'm impressed with the fact that LSU's been able to find enough pitching as well as deal with key injuries early in the season and seem to be able to fill out their lineup with capable hitters. Paul Maneri does it again. I had real doubts about the pitching staff moving forward, but A.J. Labas coming forward. Mikal Hilliard is a freshman out of Central High, pitching on Sundays at this point, and it's worked out so far with Zach Hess. He's stepped up and proven he can be an ace, and he pitched really well deep into the game against Missouri and still had top stuff. So he needs to be that Friday night guy, and he'll have another challenge against Vandy this week and then every week after that, and we'll see how he does over the course of the season. But LSU's in pretty good shape to compete in the SEC, which is as deep as it's ever been.
Yeah.
Mike?
I mean, I love the pitching staff coming around, and LSU's looking for a closer right now. They're trying different guys. Austin Bain's been one of them. But don't be surprised if Nick Stortz ends up as the closer, like Zach Hess did last season. Mm-hmm. He's a big guy, big tall guy with great stuff, and he as long as with the emergence of Mikal Hilliard as a Sunday starter, if he can keep that up, and Caleb Gilbert can maintain his consistency on Saturday, then and with Zach Hess on Friday, you have a good weekend rotation. You can bring in a Stortz as a freshman and let him, just fire away as a closer. Don't be surprised if he ends up LSU's.
Talk about your Privateers.
Privateers have been dealing with injuries early in the season and able to get Oren Veillon back, who is the best athlete on the team in center field. But right now, they're not losing because of pitching. They're losing because the defense has been an issue. Blake Dean's been trying to get the right bats in the lineup, but at the same time, it hasn't worked out with the right mix defensively. I know he's not happy about it, and they've blown some games late because of booting the baseball. So we'll see if they're able to overcome that moving forward, because I think the offense has been more capable than he was worried it might be at this point. But if you keep booting the ball defensively in the Southland, so many fundamental teams in that league, you're going to lose a lot of games.
Mike, you had an interesting comment about Tulane baseball on the radio show last Friday about the future and how tough it's going to be for them to really be back where Rick Jones had them. If you would.
Look, I mean, I think they can. I mean, they have really good coaching. They have good players and everything. I'm not trying to disparage them at all, but it's just going to be tough. Tulane with the financial situation, with the lack of scholarships, with teams increasing their play, Southeastern, UNO, McNeese, Lafayette, of course LSU. You got teams in Texas, Mississippi. That it's going to be tough for Tulane to get back to the glory days of Rick Jones, and it kind of started happening after Katrina when Rick Jones was there, and they had a couple of good seasons. The coach after Rick Jones, I'm getting old. I can't remember his name. Now he's with Texas.
Right.
But but I hope I'm wrong. But I just think it's tough. I mean, you're seeing it. You're seeing it year after year now.
And big congratulations to Coach Sless and Coach Will Wade for both UNO and LSU's seasons. Also to Southeastern, Nicholls State. Also ULL. I mean, pretty good basketball. Not what we want in terms of NCAA tournament, but guys, with about 15 seconds each, both agree that they look like they're on the right path.
I really like it. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Will Wade, certainly what he's doing in this recruiting class coming in, they could be a title contender next year. And UNO played so many young guys down the stretch. They could be making that step forward back to the top of the conference. And Southeastern's still going to be very good with Marlon Veal back for his senior year, the defensive player of the year in the conference this past year.
Mike, 50 seconds.
Oh, I love Will Wade. You know that. I've been on him since
before he got the job.
Well, that was my recommendation.
Yes, it was.
We're having dinner with Will Wade and Bob Marlin after this. You want to come?
I'm going to the gym.
It's going to be a food fight,
actually. No, I'm going to the gym. Mike Fazende, always with me on a Friday. Check him out tomorrow between 12 and 1. And, of course, Jude Young on 990 AM WGSO and CrescentCitySports.com. Thanks for being with us. Thanks so much for tuning in. Remember, there's a rebroadcast of this program each and every Friday night right here on WLAE-TV at 10 p.m. Also 9 p.m. on Friday nights on Pelican Sports Television. If you missed any of the previous episodes, check those out at ericasher.com, where you can also listen live to my radio show and also download the podcast of my radio show. Check us out weekdays noon to 2 on Sports 1280, 101.1 FM HD2, the iHeartRadio app, free download for your smartphone or tablet. Again, special thanks to Mike Fazende and Jude Young, also to our WLAE production staff that do a fantastic job. Ron Yeager, Jim Dotson, Trey Lopez, Naila Jones, and my director, William Hill. I'm your host, Eric Asher. Thanks so much for watching. We'll see you next week for another edition of Inside New Orleans Sports.